Margaret Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her corner office, watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to let fall. She had built an empire from nothing, turned a small tech startup into a billion-dollar company, and earned a reputation as one of the most formidable CEOs in the industry. But none of it mattered anymore. None of it could fix what was broken. Her daughter Emma lay in a hospital bed 30 floors below, staring at a ceiling she'd memorized in the 6 months since the accident. The skiing trip that was supposed to be a celebration of Emma's college acceptance had ended with a tree, black ice, and a spinal injury that stole everything from a girl who had once danced through life like it was choreographed just for her. Margaret had hired the best specialists money could buy. She'd flown in experts from Switzerland, consulted with rehabilitation centers across 3 continents, and funded experimental treatments that hadn't even reached clinical trials. But Emma's eyes told a story that no medical breakthrough could rewrite. She had given up. At 19, her daughter had decided that life in a wheelchair wasn't worth living, and Margaret was watching her fade away one silent day at a time. The physical therapy sessions had stopped 3 weeks ago when Emma refused to get out of bed. The psychologist visits ended when Emma simply closed her eyes and pretended to sleep through every appointment. Even Margaret's presence seemed to exhaust her, as if the weight of her mother's desperate hope was too heavy to bear. That Tuesday morning started like every other. Margaret canceled her morning meetings and went to Emma's private room at the rehabilitation center, carrying a chai latte that would go cold and untouched on the nightstand. But when she arrived, she found something different. Emma was sitting upright, and there was a man in the room, a janitor based on the maintenance uniform, crouched beside her wheelchair with a sketchpad balanced on his knee. "I'm thinking we start with the basics," he was saying, his voice carrying a gentle authority that made Margaret pause in the doorway. "Charcoal first. It's messy, but it's forgiving. You can smudge out mistakes, layer shadows, make something beautiful out of what seems like chaos." Emma, who hadn't spoken more than 3 words together in weeks, was leaning forward slightly, looking at whatever he'd drawn. "I don't know how to draw," she said quietly. "Neither did I, 6 years ago," the man replied. "But after my wife died, I needed something to do with my hands at night after my daughter fell asleep. Something that wasn't scrolling through memories or drowning in what-ifs. Turned out I was pretty terrible at first, but terrible is just the beginning of something, you know." Margaret should have interrupted. She should have questioned who this person was and why he was in her daughter's room. But Emma was engaged, actually present in a way she hadn't been since before the accident, so Margaret stayed silent in the hallway, hidden just beyond the doorframe. "What do you draw?" Emma asked. "Whatever I see that makes me remember the world is bigger than my pain," he said simply. "Birds, mostly. My daughter Lily loves birds. She's 7 and she's obsessed with the idea that something can just decide to fly, like it's the easiest thing in the world." He paused, then added, "I know what you're thinking. That flying is exactly what you can't do anymore. But I'm not talking about legs, Emma. I'm talking about the part of you that chose what to chase before anyone told you what was possible." Margaret watched her daughter's face crumple, watched her finally cry the tears she'd been holding back for months. And she watched this stranger, this janitor, simply sit with that grief without trying to fix it or explain it away. His name was James Porter, and Margaret learned his story in pieces over the following weeks. He worked the night shift at the rehabilitation center, cleaning rooms and hallways after the medical staff went home. He was 36, a single father after losing his wife to cancer, and he'd been cleaning buildings for 11 years to support his daughter while she slept safely with his mother a few blocks away. He drew because it was free and quiet, and it gave him a reason to notice beautiful things in a life that had taken so much. He had started talking to Emma purely by accident. He'd been cleaning her room late one evening, thought she was asleep, and started sketching the view from her window by the dim light from the hallway. She'd asked what he was drawing. He'd shown her. They'd talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, about birds and bad TV shows and what rain sounded like. It was the first real conversation Emma had had since the accident, the first time someone had talked to her like she was still whole. After that, James started bringing his sketchpad earlier in his shift. He'd spend his 15-minute break in Emma's room, teaching her basic techniques, talking about texture and shadow and negative space. He brought her charcoal pencils and cheap paper. He showed her how to hold the pencil differently when her fingers wouldn't cooperate, how to tape the paper at an angle that worked with her limited mobility. He never mentioned the wheelchair or the therapy she was refusing or the future that terrified her. He just taught her how to see things worth capturing. Margaret watched her daughter transform. Emma started asking for her wheelchair so she could reach the window better for natural light. She requested to go outside to the courtyard, not for therapy, but to draw the fountain and the pigeons that gathered there. She started talking to Margaret again, showing her sketches, discussing shading techniques with a spark in her voice that had been extinguished for half a year. One evening, Margaret waited for James after his shift. She found him in the staff locker room, changing out of his uniform, and she did something she'd never done before. She thanked someone for something money couldn't buy. "You brought my daughter back," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to repay you." James looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. "I didn't do anything special. I just treated her like a person instead of a patient." "I want to help you," Margaret insisted. "You work nights cleaning floors when you should be." "Should be what?" James interrupted gently. "Making more money. Climbing some ladder." "Ms. Chen, with respect, I know who you are. I know you think success looks a certain way. But I have a daughter who feels safe and loved. I have work that lets me pay our bills and be home when she wakes up. I have time to draw and notice beautiful things. I'm not lacking anything." Margaret realized she'd been seeing him as broken too, as someone who needed fixing, rescuing, elevating to something better. The assumption felt ugly in the light of his contentment. "But I can at least," she started. "You can let Emma draw," James said. "You can stop seeing her wheelchair as an ending and start seeing it as just a different way of moving through a life that's still hers to create. That's what I need from you. The rest, the trying to fix everything with money and power, that's what was crushing her." It was the truth Margaret needed to hear from someone with nothing to lose by telling it. 3 months later, Emma enrolled in online art classes. 6 months after that, she started physical therapy again, not to walk, but to strengthen her arms and core so she could paint larger canvases. A year later, she held her first small exhibition at a local gallery, selling 5 pieces and donating the proceeds to the rehabilitation center where she'd met James. Margaret attended the opening, watching her daughter maneuver her wheelchair between admirers, glowing with purpose and pride. James was there too, standing in a corner with his daughter Lily, who was now 8 and had contributed 3 crayon drawings of birds to the exhibition at Emma's insistence. "I'll never be able to thank you enough," Margaret said to him quietly. James smiled, watching Emma laugh with a collector who was gushing over her work. "You already have. You let her be broken for a while. You stopped trying to fix everything. That's what she needed from you." Margaret realized he was right. Her greatest act of love hadn't been the specialists or the money or the desperate searching for solutions. It had been learning to sit with her daughter's pain, to let her find her own path forward, and to trust that hope could look different than she'd imagined. Emma would never walk again. But she had learned to fly anyway, in all the ways that mattered. And it started with a single dad who whispered, not just to her but to them both, the same message in different ways: "You're not broken. You're just becoming something new." Sometimes the most profound help we can offer isn't a solution. It's simply being present in someone's pain and showing them that life, even the one they didn't choose, is still worth creating.